Hi, Zizaran here with another Ultimatum League starter, and this is going to be Assassin Blades Blast. This did actually get a nerf, but it was not enough. This should still be incredibly strong. Both the Chieftain and Assassin versions are still really good even with the nerf, but the Assassin even more so, because it's kind of less affected. So don't worry, this should be quite possibly the single best boss killer, especially on softcore. So this should be able to clear incredibly fast and do every boss. So this is a 2-button ability to play. So that means that we're using Bladefall first, and that will like leave blades on the ground. Now, a little trick is to basically do Bladefall and instantly try to follow it up with a Blade Blast, because the faster you do it, there will still be blades falling without reaching like the maximum amount of blades that can be on the ground. So cast speed helps us a lot there as well. And I just want to make sure that people know that they should try to instantly follow it up. If you, for example, did Bladefall and then waited for a little bit and then Blade Blasted, you would do a lot less damage than if you did it instantly. And then for things like mapping, etc., make sure that you keep your Plague Bearer up as much as possible. This is basically a Poison Righteous Fire. It'll create an aura around you that, well, especially with running with Obliterations, you're just going to be running around exploding everything. And even in tier 16 maps, it should have incredible clear. And this is one of the strongest builds by far. Really would recommend this. So as normal, our build guides have gotten that extra step, an extra upgrade for Ultimatum League. And obviously we have the point for point leveling as per normal with ascendancies and everything built into the skill tree here. So you can see that as you go along. And make sure you have the Path of Exile community fork to be able to access this. So here we have like an early league tree with no clusters, and then we have a future one with what clusters that would be good to go for. So a lot of options here. If we go to the skills, you can see here we're going to be leveling with Caustic Arrow and at level 12 Toxic Rain Mines, because we don't get Unleash early, and Unleash makes such a large change in the build. Obviously, if you're playing something like a Chieftain version, you don't even get Unleash until Act 6, which is kind of painful on these starts. But the Assassin has no such problem, so you can switch instantly to Bladefall Blade Blast at level 38. Now, do remember that at least the Blade Blast gem, you do want to pick it up as early as possible, because you want to level it and have it at full strength. If you do switch to level 1 gem, that's going to be a lot less damage. For items, we have several different setups, and Obliteration is basically what you want to get as early as possible. These are very common and easy to get, either through divination cards or just as random drops. They're pretty accessible. And then until you get that, just try to get a weapon with either percentage spell damage will be okay in the start, or +1 physical spell skill gems, which is also very easy to get on like item level 2 Driftwood Wand that you can buy in the first town. And trying to buy something like that on Trade League as well should be pretty okay the first day for 1 or 2 chaos. Other than that, the early gear is pretty straightforward. You're basically just looking for life and resist and a very common amulet. So the reason we use Ungol's Harmony is, the best way to explain it is sort of like Elemental Overload for poison builds, or more importantly for assassins. So, and there are instructions on a lot of the items. So if you see the red text, and this is on several of the items and the helmets, etc., it will tell you a lot of like extra information that you might need. It'll be in red or green text. But here you can see that it gives you a large amount of crit. We get up to 350% crit chance. And the reason this amulet is so good is because of Toxic Delivery. Poisons you inflict with critical strikes deal 50% more damage. And we're never using the critical strike multiplier because we're not using Perfect Agony. So Ungol's Harmony is just incredibly good value, and it has life on it. So it's very hard to pass up. And for this build, we have a pretty cheap Anoint. Dire Torment is an Azure, a Crimson, and an Opalescent oil. Other than that, another really good oil is obviously Diamond Skin, just to get some extra resist and help with gearing early on. And a really cheap damage Anoint could be Poison Fangs, which is just clear, amber, and azure, but obviously not as good as the other one. Bandits for this build is going to be skill point. We don't actually need a Lyra because we're not using critical strike multiplier. And the Pantheon is going to be Solaris and Ralakesh. If we move over to the late game here, we can see we're still using Obliterations. They're just that good for clearing. However, if you want to do specifically bosses, grabbing 2 cold iron points is an insane amount of damage. So it's so budget, and you can do literally every boss in the game with these. Something that I like doing on this build is literally having these in my weapon swap. Then you're obviously not leveling 6 gems to sell, but it's so nice being able to just click W and weapon swap and instantly be in your like high damage setup. if you have exactly the same links in your obliterations and your cold iron points with like at literally the same position, it'll not screw up your toolbar, it'll not screw up your auras or anything like that. But they do need to be exactly the same color and socket with each gem on either side. Then the game will let you do it very smoothly. So try doing that. Late game as well, we have, as I said, a lot of extra information, especially on the helmet. Here we talk about all the different enchants that are good. Obviously, Plague Bearer, really, really good for clearing. And then you have, with Blade Blast damage or Blade Blast AoE, are both good options for extra damage. The way AoE works on Blade Blast is it's sort of good and bad. The more AoE you have, the further apart Blade Fall will be from each other. And that's why like getting something like concentrated effect on your blade fall will make those blades fall closer together. And now the more AoE we have on Blade Blast, so that's why we do want to try to get as much Blade Blast AoE as possible, they will have more overlap. So that makes that it's a pretty hard build to calculate in Path of Building, but we have an insane amount of damage. Now make sure you check out the notes section as well. We've hired more people and Organic have put an insane amount of work into loads of information here. It's also clearly labeled, so if you run into any problems, the notes section is going to be tons and tons of helps. And we even have things for new players like skill gem locations if you're new to the game. So hopefully this all helps. Let us know how you like the new format and all the additional things we've done. Some other uniques for using the build as well is Carcass Stack is really good. Obviously AoE is great for this build and we also get area damage. It's got life and resist. Azerius Step is really good because this is a dodge build. So we do have some sustain from the Ascendancy because we have recovers 0.5% life per poison affecting enemies you kill. However, we don't have that much boss sustain. So just having a large amount of dodge, evasion, and spell dodge does make us fairly tanky, and we do get some leech whenever a series promises up. We're also using Corralito's signature for another large damage burst. And again, there's like no padding in the configuration. Everything should be set to only things that will be active and do matter. So we try to do this and make sure, because if we can make the build work on a cheap budget for new players, we can make it work for anyone. So let's do the checklist we walked through just to make sure that everything is answered. Are there too many gems to equip? So the only thing, it does struggle a little bit on gems. You're going to have to swap out your Plague Bearer setup for your Wither setup for bosses. So something like a Wither Totem is used on hard bosses like Shaper and Awakener to get extra damage. And obviously Plague Bearer doesn't do much against a boss like this. It's simply for clearing. Can the player have mana issues? Absolutely. We use an Enduring Mana Flask, and honestly you could just do this for all time. However, especially once you want to start doing bosses, there are some tips you can do here. Bladefall doesn't necessarily need to be high level, so you can do Bladefall at level 1 and keep a high level Blade Blast. This will lower your mana cost by quite a lot, and in addition to that, you can get 2 rings with the reduced mana cost on them, the Elrond craft. It's like named non-channeling seals have -8 to mana cost. So I would recommend that as well, and getting at least 1 item with 60-70% mana regen on it would help a lot. For even further mana regen, there is an enchant on boots, which is 70% mana regen if you cast a spell recently. So it is possible to be able to drop the mana flask. Useful leveling uniques. The number one thing this build benefits from is gem levels. So getting blue ones with +1 physical damage level, skill level, is really, really big. Do remember that these don't need to be socketed in the wand itself. And that means you could get, for example, either a +1 or a +2 Tabula to further help you with leveling. Other than that, just your standard like leveling uniques like Cold Rim and Wanderlust, etc. And Ungol's Harmony is particularly good once you get the Toxic Delivery Ascendancy. For sustain, that is something the build struggles on a little bit. You can use the Vitality, and again, you might have to play around with the level and things like Enlighten to get it as high level as possible. And also make sure that your mana is at a comfortable level. So make sure you don't necessarily always level up your Vitality. And speaking of Vitality, this is part of how we can help with our sustain. We do have pretty good sustain for like mapping and killing because we get life back per poison, but for bosses we don't get a large amount of life back, and this is where Vitality helps us. Other than that, on auras we have Flesh and Stone and Herald of Agony. Flesh and Stone is particularly used to blind all enemies around us. We want to keep that in Sand Stance. What are the biggest financial hurdles of this build? So this is a very, very cheap and easy to do build. If it becomes very popular, then things like Cold Iron points could be expensive, but getting like wands or daggers with +1 physical spell skill gems and chaos damage over time multiplier should also be really good. Now do remember, spell damage at the endgame isn't as good as, for example, percentage chaos damage. Another thing worth mentioning as well is that while Bladefall and Blade Blast are physical spells, if you get a wand or a dagger or an axe, for example, and it says percentage increased physical damage, that doesn't scale the build. That's only local to the weapon, as if you were attacking with it, like with Cyclone or Reeve. So make sure that you aren't using a wand or something that's a 70% increased physical damage. Again, thanks so much for watching our build, guys. I hope you like the new upgraded format and everything we're doing with the builds. If you have any questions, I'm live on Twitch every day, and thanks so much for all the support. Sub if you liked the video, but more importantly, try to die less than I do.